The scariest thing about programming today is that AI can already do most of it.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow.
It really is. I mean, if you've spent the last decade or, even just the last couple of years mastering your tech stack, that sentence is an absolute gut punch.
Oh, totally.
But hey, welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into a massive, mostly invisible earthquake that's happening in the professional world right now.
Right under our feet.
Exactly. Our mission today is to tear into a concept outlined in this just phenomenal piece of writing we have today. It's called the mindset gap, from code to systems thinking. And the goal for you listening to this is to navigate a really uncomfortable reality, like what actually provides value when technology can do the heavy lifting for us.
And, it is a jarring realization.
Yeah.
But sitting with that discomfort is just so necessary right now. I mean, we're living through an era of intense technological anxiety.
Yeah, especially in the development world, people are freaking out.
Right. But if we stop looking at this purely as a threat to our livelihoods, and instead we view it as a diagnostic tool, it forces a beautiful, albeit kind of terrifying question.
Mm-hmm.
If we accept the premise that an artificial intelligence can handle the bulk of writing the actual code, what is left for the humans?
Right. Because if the machine is doing the typing, and let's be honest, doing it faster and with way fewer syntax errors than I ever could,
Way fewer.
what am I getting paid for?
Exactly. And that brings us to a hard line that needs to be drawn. And it's a distinction that completely redefines the industry, I think. There is a massive misconception right now that being a developer just means writing code.
Yes.
But there's a fundamental difference between a programmer and a developer. This isn't about losing a job. It's about the evolution of a role.
Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity to redefine where your actual value lies, whether you are directly in tech or navigating really any knowledge work.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we really need to look at why we've attached so much value to the act of writing code in the first place. Like coding the actual syntax, the semicolons, the specific API calls is ultimately just commodity.
A total commodity.
Right. Syntax can be learned, it can be copied, and obviously it can be generated by AI in seconds now. So programming, by this definition, is merely a mechanical skill.
Yeah.
It's literally just the physical act of translating an instruction into a language a computer understands.
And it's a bitter pill to swallow because syntax is objectively really hard to learn at first.
Oh, for sure.
Like, think about the historical context here. For decades, the barrier to entry in computing was simply speaking the machine's language. Compilers were unforgiving.
Oh, brutal.
Right? Resources were scarce. If you missed a single bracket, the whole thing crashed.
The dreaded missing semicolon.
Exactly. So naturally, we attach really high value to the translation itself. People still think, I spent 4 years learning this highly obscure, complex language. Therefore, my knowledge of its quirks is my primary economic value.
But that's not true anymore.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
We've inadvertently rewarded people just for being really fast translators.
Right. And, I was trying to visualize this shift, and it made me think of, like, a high-end restaurant kitchen.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah, so knowing syntax is like knowing how to perfectly, uniformly chop 100 carrots into a Brunoise cut.
Right, right.
It's a specialized skill. It takes years of practice to do it fast without, like, chopping your finger off.
Definitely.
But a machine, a specialized food processor, can replicate that easily, perfectly, every single time. Being a developer, on the other hand, is like being the executive chef. It's knowing how to design a 5-course menu that tells a story, uses seasonal ingredients, manages the food cost, and crucially, won't give the customers food poisoning. The chef isn't valuable because they chop carrots the fastest.
The chef analogy really works. But, what's fascinating here is if we take it a step further, it really captures what AI is doing to the industry. And AI isn't just a physical food processor.
What is it, then?
It's a food processor that has instantaneously memorized every cookbook ever written.
Oh, wow.
It can generate 1 million recipes in a second. So the executive chef's value isn't even in knowing the recipe anymore.
Because the machine has the recipe.
Exactly. The value is knowing what the local critics want to eat, knowing the supply chain vulnerabilities if the local farms freeze over, and understanding the entire dining experience. When syntax is generated for us, the actual value shifts entirely away from the keyboard and into conceptualization.
Man, it's a total shift in professional identity.
It really is.
We are moving from the physical action of coding to the underlying philosophy of building.
And it explains why AI is so remarkably adept at the specific task of programming. AI functions as a pattern recognition and replication engine at a massive scale.
Right.
Syntax is nothing but patterns and deterministic rules. So of course the machine is going to beat us at that. When we equate our professional worth with our ability to memorize rules, when we fall into that syntax trap, we are running a race the machine has already won.
So if the value isn't in writing the code, we have to isolate where it actually lives.
Right.
And we've established it lives in the mindset. And to distill this, the source text looks at a tale of two very different questions. A programmer asks, how do I make this work? But a developer asks, what breaks later?
Yeah, and those two questions encapsulate entirely different worldviews.
They do. But, I actually want to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because as much as what breaks later sounds incredibly visionary, is asking, how do I make this work actually a bad thing?
Yeah.
Because for you listening right now, think about your own job. Whatever you do, there are days when the deadline is in 45 minutes. The product manager is breathing down your neck, the client is on hold, and you just need the script or the database query or the presentation to work.
Absolutely.
It's incredibly relatable. Getting it to work is the baseline of doing your job. If it doesn't work, nothing else matters.
Getting it to work is the baseline. Yeah, but that's the trap. It is only the bare minimum.
Okay.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, asking, how do I make this work, is a hyper-local, immediate-term question. It focuses entirely on the present moment and a single, isolated task.
Right.
The developer's focus, on the other hand, is built on a triad of concepts.
Yeah.
Trade-offs, pressure, and consequences. When you ask what breaks later, you are deliberately expanding the timeline.
You're stepping back from the screen and looking at the system.
You're anticipating the future. Let's look at the reality of software. If I use a quick, dirty shortcut to make a feature work right now because the product manager is yelling.
Which happens every day.
Every day. But what happens when we scale from 100 beta testers to 10,000 concurrent users?
Yeah, it all falls apart.
What happens to the database load? What happens when a malicious actor probes that specific shortcut for an injection vulnerability?
Right. It's like the difference between laying asphalt and actually doing urban planning.
Oh, I love that.
A programmer builds a beautiful, perfectly paved intersection because the ticket said, build an intersection here. They got it to work.
Right.
But a developer looks at that same intersection and asks where the traffic will back up during a snowstorm in 5 years. They ask how emergency vehicles will reroute if a lane is blocked.
That urban planning metaphor hits a nail on the head. And this is precisely where AI currently hits a hard wall.
Right.
And where human value is cemented.
Right.
Because an AI does not have real-world skin in the game.
It doesn't care.
It doesn't feel the visceral pressure of a system outage at 3:00 a.m. on a holiday weekend.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to sit on a Zoom call and explain to an angry enterprise client why their proprietary data was exposed.
The AI is sleeping fine.
Exactly. Because it lacks that skin in the game, it struggles to genuinely anticipate consequences and weigh complex human-centric trade-offs. The AI can pace the intersection perfectly in seconds, but the human has to know the snowstorm is coming.
The human brings the context. The human brings the consequence.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've established the ideal. Anticipating what breaks later is the goal. We need to be systems thinkers. But let's look at the harsh reality of the industry right now, because a lot of people are completely failing to do this. Developers are drowning.
They really are. There is a pervasive feeling of being lost in the tech sector right now. And diagnosing the mechanism behind why people feel so lost is critical.
Well, the technological landscape just changes too incredibly fast.
Yeah.
Think about the last 2 years alone. There are new frameworks, entirely new paradigms of AI tools, new libraries, and shifted expectations dropping like every few months.
Every week, it feels like.
Right. And the natural human response to that kind of velocity is to just react constantly. People try to learn everything. They try to keep up with every single update, every new language variant, every new tool that launches on Product Hunt on a Tuesday.
Which is an impossible task.
It's totally impossible. And here's where it gets really interesting for me. There is this terrible compounding irony happening.
Okay.
The harder people try to keep up with every single new tool to prove their value, the less effective they actually become at the very thing that makes them valuable.
Wow.
By sprinting on the treadmill to learn every new syntax, they lose the capacity for systems thinking. They end up learning everything, understanding nothing deeply, and eventually their thinking just becomes shallow.
We really need to look at the underlying mechanics of why this happens, because it's not just a personal failing. It's a systemic trap.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the cognitive load versus the dopamine hit.
Okay, I'm with you.
When a programmer sits down and fixes a quick syntax error or
Yeah.
learns how to spin up a hello world in a brand new framework, they get an immediate dopamine hit.
Oh, for sure. The compiler turns green.
Yes,
Yeah.
the text appears on the screen.
Yeah.
It feels like progress. Systems architecture, on the other hand, is slow. It's ambiguous, and it's often invisible. There is no immediate green light when you are designing a resilient data pipeline. It requires immense cognitive bandwidth.
So when you are exhausted by the pace of the industry, you naturally gravitate toward the quick wins, the shallow syntax.
Yes, and the industry actively pushes people into this shallow thinking.
How so?
Look at modern corporate hiring practices. Human resources departments use applicant tracking systems.
Oh, the ATS bots.
Right, automated keyword scanners that filter resumes based on the latest, shiniest frameworks. If a company decides they are using some brand new technology released 6 months ago, the ATS scans for that specific keyword.
And the developers know this.
Of course they do. So they are essentially forced to constantly skim the surface of a dozen different tools just to get past an HR filter, rather than spending that time mastering the underlying architecture.
Man, so you are just surviving the waves. You aren't navigating the ship.
That's beautifully put. Shallow thinking is the direct, unavoidable consequence of an environment that demands constant, rapid adaptation without giving you the space to consolidate that knowledge.
Yeah.
For anyone listening to this who feels a constant, low-level hum of anxiety, that fear that you are falling behind in your career because you haven't mastered the latest software update or the newest management trend, that feeling is entirely valid.
It really is.
It is a real physiological response to chronic information overload.
Yeah.
But trying to outlearn the treadmill is a trap. It forces you back into being a programmer whose only goal is to figure out how to make this new tool work, rather than a developer who understands the whole ecosystem.
So we have our diagnosis, shallow thinking, caused by a frantic, fast-changing technological landscape and systemic pressures that reward shiny new tools over deep understanding.
Exactly.
The treadmill's moving too fast, but we aren't just going to leave you stranded there. We have to pivot to the antidote.
Yes, secure.
And that antidote is the power of mental models.
This is the separator. This is where the true power of the developer mindset is fully realized.
Because strong developers, the ones who actually thrive, they don't panic every time technology evolves. Because they understand something fundamental. Tools change fast. Mental models don't. These individuals are often described as calm developers. They stand out not because they memorize the documentation for the newest framework overnight, but because they can think clearly inside complexity. But, I really want to break down the mechanics of this. How does relying on a mental model actually create calmness? For you listening right now, I'm sure you could use a little more calm clarity when dealing with the complex chaos of your daily work life.
So let's ground this in a real technical reality.
Okay.
Let's define a mental model in this context. A mental model is a foundational concept of how things interact, independent of the syntax or the specific tool being used. Take state management in software engineering.
Okay, walk me through that. What is state management?
In any application, state is just the current condition of the app. It's what a user has clicked, what data has loaded, what's currently in a shopping cart.
Got it.
A strong mental model of state management means you deeply understand how data flows. You understand the concepts of one-way data flow, mutations, how components re-render when the data changes.
Right.
And you understand the trade-offs of storing that data locally versus on a server. You understand the system.
So the mental model is really the underlying physics of the application.
Yes. Now, let's say you've spent 3 years building apps using a specific tool, like React. Suddenly the industry shifts, your company changes directions, and now you have to build in Vue or Svelte or whatever the next big thing is.
Yeah.
If your entire identity and value was tied to the syntax of React, you panic. You feel like you are starting over from zero. You jump back on the treadmill.
Because the syntax is completely different.
Exactly. But if you have a strong mental model of state management, you don't panic. You look at the new tool and ask, okay, how does this specific framework handle state mutation? You are just mapping a new syntax onto an architecture you already deeply understand.
That makes so much sense. So the panic comes from mistaking the tool for the system itself.
That's it. When you lack the mental model, every new tool feels like an entirely new universe you have to conquer from scratch. That is what causes the cognitive overload and the reactive, shallow thinking.
But with the mental model.
With the mental model, a new tool is just a new vehicle. You already know how to drive. You just need to find where they put the turn signal in this specific car.
Tools change fast. Mental models don't. That is an incredibly empowering realization.
It really is.
It is the ultimate anchor in the storm of technological change. Because if the AI learns a completely new programming language tomorrow, the calm developer doesn't bat an eye.
Not at all.
Because the rules of data architecture, the logic of user experience, the reality of server loads, the constraints of network latency, those mental models remain completely intact. The AI is just a much faster typer for those systems.
And, this raises an important question about the end game of this shift. We were talking about something much deeper than just a skill set.
Mm-hmm.
When your professional worth is tied to a specific tool, a programming language, a proprietary software suite, a physical technique, your identity is incredibly fragile. The moment that tool becomes obsolete, or the moment an AI can use that tool better than you, you feel obsolete.
You lose your sense of professional self.
Yes. But when your worth is tied to your mental models, your identity shifts. Your value becomes your ability to ask what breaks later, your capacity to map new inputs to foundational systems, and your ability to navigate complexity without panicking.
Wow.
That kind of deep systemic understanding cannot be easily automated away. It ceases to be just something you do. It becomes how your brain organizes chaos. It becomes your identity.
And it completely flips the script on what high performance looks like in the modern world. For so long, we've glorified the 10x developer who frantically types 100 words a minute in a dark room, churning out lines of code.
The hacker stereotype.
Exactly. But calmness is actually the ultimate metric of a true professional. High performance isn't frantic output. High performance is sitting quietly, looking at a highly complex, chaotic system, and knowing exactly where the structural weak points are before anyone has even written a single line of code.
Right. Because the noise of the industry is so incredibly loud right now, the people who can maintain that calm systems-level view, the ones who aren't distracted by the shiny new syntax, they're becoming infinitely more valuable.
So let's take a step back and look at the whole picture we've dissected today. We started with this very real, visceral fear that AI is taking over the act of programming, rendering our harding skills useless. But we discovered that the thing we were afraid of losing, the syntax, the code generation, was always just a commodity. It was a false differentiator that the industry accidentally rewarded for decades. We learned that the vital difference between a task executor and a true builder is the question they ask.
Moving from the hyperlocal, how do I make this work right now, to the systemic anticipation of what breaks later.
Exactly. We also confronted the very real danger of the modern tech treadmill. Reacting constantly to new tools doesn't make you adaptable. It leads to cognitive overload and shallow thinking.
It forces you to play the machine's game.
And finally, we arrived at the antidote. Building robust, foundational mental models that allow us to remain calm, to map new tools onto existing architectural knowledge, and to forge an identity based on deep systems thinking.
Beautifully summarized.
So what does this all mean for you? Because this isn't just a lesson for software engineers in Silicon Valley. This dynamic is a mirror for absolutely any knowledge profession.
Yes, it applies to everywhere.
I want to challenge you, whatever your industry, whatever your daily tasks look like, to look critically at your own workflow. Are you just focusing on the syntax of your job? Are you just perfectly chopping the carrots, hitting the immediate deadlines, and asking, how do I get this task done by 5 p.m.? Or are you looking at the underlying systems? Are you actively building the mental models that will make you invaluable when a machine inevitably learns to do the repetitive, task-based parts of your day?
The practical application of building mental models is clear, but I actually want to project this forward because there is a philosophical edge to this reality that we have to contend with.
Okay, hit me.
We've concluded that as tools change and AI takes over the execution, the developer is defined purely by their mental models and systems thinking.
Right.
But if tools continue to evolve at this exponential rate and AI becomes so deeply integrated that we eventually stop touching the tools entirely, if the physical act of programming completely vanishes into the background, does the title developer even make sense anymore?
Oh, wow. If we aren't developing the code, what are we?
If all we are doing is managing systems, orchestrating interactions, and weighing human consequences, are we developers or are we just digital philosophers? And furthermore, our entire premise today relies on the assumption that AI only masters syntax. But what happens when AI eventually masters systems thinking too?
That's a terrifying thought.
What if the machine learns to accurately predict what breaks later with more foresight, weighing variables across global supply chains and server loads instantly? What will be the next mindset gap we have to cross to maintain our human value?
That is a staggering thought to leave on. I mean, for decades, the things that made us valuable were visible. We like things to be clean and categorized, a certification, a specific coding language on a resume, a tangible output.
Mhm.
But in the landscape of our future careers, the things that make us visible, the things that make us truly irreplaceable, are entirely unseen. They are the mental models quietly operating in our heads. Keep building them. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep asking what breaks later.